One of my regrets from grad school was not being able to afford to fly back internationally and walk in graduation. I am but a simple little creature who really wanted to do the whole hooding ceremony. Well, now that I have enrolled in the prestigious Peterson Academy, I've found an excuse to deck myself out in academic regalia. College Core, get on my level. Join me as we take a look at Jordan Burnt Peterson's latest anti-establishment educational endeavor. This video made possible thanks to the continuing support of viewers, patrons, and PayPal pals like you. Thanks! We are interrupting the regularly scheduled Beyond Order video to talk about Peterson's online educational platform that saw its early access launch in late August and has the full launch September 9th. If you're new, hi, I'm Cass, Dr. Eris if you're nasty, and I have a cognitive psychology PhD but life can have a interesting sense of humor. I make edutainment here on YouTube. A solid chunk of that has turned into, let's call it, giving working examples of how to read through somebody's arguments and check their reasoning and sources. And the bulk of what we've been working with has been Peterson's life advice books. It has not been a quick process, to say the least, and we are actually interrupting that process to get this video out in a timely manner. I'm going to talk a little about the history of the Peterson Academy, then go through the sales pitch. And we're going to spend a bit of time talking about the courses and the content creators of them before I give you my first impressions of the website. For full disclosure, I have not yet watched the entirety of one course. I've skimmed through a couple of videos for a couple courses and have taken the entirety of the intro psych quizzes. And if you're curious about the contents of any of those videos, hit that like button and subscribe so I know to do more. And actually, you can do the full YouTube thing, just like it for funsies. Subscribe, because who else is going to dress up like this on the platform? And also comment with what content creator or course you hope Peterson adds. You can support me in this admittedly bizarre endeavor through Patreon, Fourth Wall, and also pick up some new merch. Yeah! There's a new Citation E design, not that Max is going to let you see it right now, with a chaos dragon keeping watch over everything. And I've got it on all your favorites. Hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, stickers, and don't worry, no, old design's not going anywhere. I just wanted something new and fresh and a bit metal, you know? Okay, let's get started with what the Peterson Academy isn't. What is the Peterson Academy? Starting with the history of it. To get this out of the way, this isn't the physical college Peterson promoted a couple years back. That would be the Ralston College of Atlanta, Georgia, and he's the chancellor of it. And seemingly little else since 2022, if the tray at the bottom of the college's page on him is anything to go by. From their 2024 to 2025 course catalog, we are told that, quote, Ralston College is authorized to operate and to grant the degree of Masters of Arts in the Humanities by the Georgia Non-Public Post-Secondary Education Commission, and they're working on getting accredited. This is an important distinction. As per the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, which is the organization in the US responsible for this stuff, authorization means a school gets to legally operate, and accreditation indicates a school has gone through a peer review evaluation on the quality of the education. This is something students as consumers need to consider when weighing their options and entertaining the possibility of the financial investment that is a college degree at this point. What will this educational process get them? How much weight will this degree carry? What will this ultimately buy them for their future? Interestingly, the Ralston course catalog has some cautions for potential students. Still in Ralston's guide, under Career Counseling and Placement of Graduates, we are informed that a Master's of Arts in Humanities is, quote, not vocational in nature in the sense that it is not designed to be preparatory for any specific career. But hey, you'll develop useful life skills. If you're lucky, maybe the college will hire you when you're done. And maybe that's why the New Year's advertisement emphasizes all the friends and network connections you'll get in this one-year MA. Plus, you know, the 8 weeks in Greece. Cynically, one might want to speculate that Peterson saw how much money Ralston was raking in and wanted in on that action himself. But actually, the Peterson Academy is an older project. There's a Mike article from 2018 talking about this then theoretical online learning platform. Pertinent highlights from this article. In 2018, Peterson was taking donations for it, and it would, quote, revolve mostly around the humanities and the great books of Western civilization. Peterson believes that his project could save millions from the degeneracy of modern universities, which are corrupted by women's studies and discussions of diversity. The article notes that Peterson's postmodern neo-Marxist boogeyman is, quote, really a rebranding of a separate anti-Semitic conspiracy called cultural Marxism, which has been used since the 1980s by the far right to explain the alleged secret motivation behind everything, from black superhero movies to the Me Too movement. Presciently, the writer mentions, quote, Peterson apparently still thinks artificial intelligence could be essential to his educational revolution, helping him create a crowdsourced university that would possibly be 50 times cheaper than a traditional college education. According to the pre-enrollment info, there will be AI quizzes in the Peterson Academy. Other existing online learning platforms like Coursera and the Khan Academy are mentioned, so Peterson isn't exactly being revolutionary here. It mentions the first module developed being a, quote, writing module, where students will evaluate, annotate, and comment on other students' writing, which sounds more like what will eventually become the essay app helmed by Peterson's son, which launched, last year? Somewhat recently. This is such old news. It talks about milestones for Peterson's Patreon, something he closed 5 years ago in protest of how other conservatives were being treated by the platform. Main point here, the Peterson Academy is something that's been in development since 2018. Given that info, I'd have thought they would have worked on hiring video editors, UI UX designers, and full stack developers further out than 3 weeks before the early access launch, but I'm admittedly not a top business lobster like Peterson, so... Pre-launch website content.
One hour later. 2 hours later. Eventually.
Oh look, they finally updated their website. We were originally promised early access at midnight Pacific time on August 21st. That time rolled around and nothing changed. Countdown was just sitting at zeros. To find out anything useful, you had to check the Peterson Academy Twitter account to see that no, actually, you'd be getting an email sometime that day before 5 p.m. to let you in, which was later changed to 7 p.m. The only email I've received from the Peterson Academy, and not their payment vendor, finally hit my inbox at 6 p.m., a full 18 hours after I was initially promised access. This bodes well, but enough complaining. Let's see what we're promised for $500,000 on the pre-launch website. You get the current and future courses, social media platform, profile, AI testing, and the community. DM's feature coming soon. 8-hour courses by professors from various prestigious institutions that will, quote, enrich your life and encourage meaningful conversations, offering an education that informs and transforms. I'll note here that not all courses are taught by professors, or professors at prestigious universities, but we'll get to that. Also, just note that I'm using the term courses incredibly loosely here, but denoting that every single time that we talk about courses would get a bit annoying, so just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. Also, I'm not going to do the math to get the exact figures, but 8 hours is a suggestion. Some courses have 8 videos that are roughly an hour in length. Some have 8 videos that are longer than an hour, and some have 6 videos, 7 videos. It's just terribly inconsistent. Then we get to the course offering. Interestingly, Peterson's Intro to Nietzsche is now first up top. The older version of the website had him in the bottom row. Weird. The sorting seems somewhat random right now. Hard to say if there will be some sort of intentional sorting by topic area or something later. If you aren't enrolled or signed in, the only info you can get about the courses and who is teaching them is in the teaser video. These try to sell you on the cool gist the class will try to convey or big picture thing you'll learn. Nothing about the presenter's background or why we should trust they're a knowledgeable source of info. After you've paid money and are signed in, there's a blurb for the class. These seem to only describe the course, not the instructor. This is terribly concerning to me. As you'll see, there are indeed some courses taught by professors with the credentials and/or experience in the content area. And then there are some courses taught by disgraced professors who have turned into conspiracy peddlers, and some others who are there because they know Peterson? Some topics can absolutely be handled by somebody whose background in it is just having a long, hard think about the topic. 'Tis a free country, after all. But I would think it's super important to have that info baked into the courses, especially for consumers who haven't purchased yet. Or at the very least, have a sort of faculty bio that can be accessed so people can have this information without having to do a bunch of independent research. What's the not cursed version of a monkey's paw wish? Things went in the right direction, but in an annoying way, because that's where I'm at. I went and did research on all of the Peterson Academy content creators because this wasn't a feature in the first week of the website being up. So with that done, everybody done, I went back and double checked, and hey, when you click on a person's name, it takes you to a little biographical blurb about them. This is not information that you can get if you haven't paid for it yet, though. So I might show you the little blurb, I might show you the Wikipedia. Maybe both when there's an amusing contrast between the two. But either way, we're going to go with the information I sourced for them and not what was autobiographical, because industry secret, at least in academia, these things are almost always written by the person themselves. Like the Intro to Neuro, guys, is very academic coded. I mention this because words like renowned or esteemed or other very self-congratulatory phrases get thrown around a bit. Keep an eye out for those. The courses available at launch. Going back to the original order, first offering is the Intro to Nutrition by Max Lugavere, who is, quoting Wikipedia, an American author who has written about diet and brain health, whose arguments, quote, are not supported by scientific evidence. The wiki reference is an article from McGill's University, a prestigious Canadian university, Office for Science and Society, warning against following Lugavere's nutritional advice. Basically, Lugavere is very much not a dietitian and arguably isn't a nutritionist either. How bad at citizen science do you have to be for McGill to put a thing up on their website about you? This course seems to be along the same lines as the diet books on his website. Up next is the Intro to Psych course by Dr. W. Keith Campbell. Campbell has a pretty solid pedigree, but confusingly is a social psychologist who seems to have specialized in narcissism. Those two don't seem to totally square to me, but maybe he'll explain it in his course. Having taken the quizzes, and more on that later, it seems like this isn't really a full, quote, exploration of the diverse field of psychology, as it seems like perception and cognition were only really brought in as utilized in social psych, to say nothing of the neuropsych absence. But we're going to tackle the meat of this course in a separate video. Third in the pre-launch posting, because they really just jumbled things post-launch, is Dr. James Orr's course on Plato. We're having to rely on his faculty page because the Wikipedia in existence for a James Orr is for a dead theology professor, not the guy responsible for this class. Bottom line, he's a philosophy of religion associate professor at Cambridge and has various philosophical research interests. It looks like there's going to be a lot of Plato in here, which isn't surprising, but then the Platonic influences are traced, quote, through key figures and their fusion with Hebraic and Christian traditions, as well as modern uses like, quote, its significance for navigating truth, knowledge, and the human condition. I think we can see why Dr. Orr was included for this topic, because as we saw in Beyond Orders Rule 6, Abandon Ideology, in Peterson's two-box categorization of the world, religion, particularly Christianity, isn't an ideology, even though it can be, especially with how Peterson uses it. Then there is the course, The Boy Crisis, by Dr. Warren Farrell. Turning to trusty old Wikipedia, we're greeted with the multiple issues warning. Quote, a major contributor to this article appears to have a close connection with its subject. This article may have been created or edited in return for undisclosed payments, a violation of Wikipedia's terms of use. And, quote, the neutrality of this article is disputed. Great. Farrell is a political scientist who became a thing as a supporter of second-wave feminism, the pre-intersectionality feminism, basically. In subsequent decades, he's pivoted to focusing on men's rights and has, apparently, been called such things as, quote, the sage of the men's movement, other quote, the Gloria Steinem of men's liberation, and final quote, the Martin Luther King of the men's movement. Before reminding you of Peterson's use of one of his more recent books, but not this one, I just want to make it clear. The patriarchy is damaging to men, as well as not men. So everybody who isn't men. It's just bad for almost everybody. The cultural prescriptions for things like how men are allowed to dress, display emotions, and the role they're supposed to have in life can be suffocating boxes. And it seems like only recently those boxes have started to open up and men be more free in their expression of these things. But then we've got the Petersons of the world trying to shove everybody back in to those suffocating boxes. Furthermore, the popularity of figures like Peterson, all the way to someone like your Andrew Tates, seems to indicate that a fundamental need isn't being met for some young men and boys. And some figures are more than happy to take advantage of that market. The question here is, where exactly does Farrell fit into things? As mentioned, Peterson cited a slightly older book by Farrell. This was in Beyond Orders Rule 4. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. I had some choice words about it. We hit some lies, damn lies, and statistics territory with this reference. Peterson's use of Farrell was to support the claim that to get ahead, you just need to work an extra 5 hours at a 40-hour job. Easy peasy. Hunting down the claim in the book, we can find that Farrell supported this claim with data from the U.S. Department of Labor Current Population Survey from 2003. To make a long story short, I was eventually able to track down the data set for this reference, and it's in an incredibly outdated governmental proprietary data format, which, of course, there's a Python package for. My husband and I tried for a couple hours to replicate Farrell's numbers, and we couldn't. But we don't know what exclusion criteria he was using, which is probably pretty important for this. Some of these exclusion criteria would include if he was talking about wage jobs or if he was also including salaried jobs, because salaried jobs don't tend to come with overtime, baby. If there were considerations for the number of jobs a person's working, somebody working 2 jobs trying to reach 40 hours or a livable wage probably isn't in a position to just pick up another 5. Just easy. After playing with the data, the specificity of this comparison, 45 hours a week compared against 40, seems to be the point where there is a maximal effect, with diminishing returns on either side of that extra 5 hours. Zooming out to the big picture, Farrell tried to come up with just-world explanations for why women tend to earn less. However, quoting one review of this book, his examination is based on single studies, personal experiences, newspaper articles, and interviews, instead of social, historical, and economic trends that give better explanations of the topic. So, the book behind this course was co-written with John Gray, the guy behind Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Yay! I imagine this course will be the lecture version of the book. From the summary and some experience in how these things tend to go, I guess there are threads of truth woven into a broader culture war-ish narrative. Following that is Symbols in Christianity by Peterson's longtime friend, Jonathan Pageau. Pageau's trained background is in art, originally postmodern before making a sharp turn into Eastern Orthodox iconography. His concept of the symbolic world holds that all of reality should be understood as a series of interlocking patterns which embody meaning. No wonder he's cozy with Peterson, huh? And it's a little funny, having poked around the intro psych a bit, that the relevant quiz for this had a couple questions about our general tendency as humans to see patterns where none exist. Let's continue. Quote, he believes the world is intrinsically symbolic and is best navigated by the use of symbols. Skipping a little further down and, quote, his observation is that Western culture has been returning to paganist patterns of thought, with social practices such as euthanasia, abortion, androgyny, some aspects of homosexuality. He also has a journal and publishing house. This is kind of what I was getting at, highlighting the importance of knowing what you're getting into with a course. Given Pageau's background, he probably has some interesting insight into the art and the symbols typically used. But then you read about his ideology, and you get a kind of insight for what sort of informational bias the class will probably have. The dwindling number of Peterson fans who are there just for the core life advice and not his political takes, even though teasing those two things apart is increasingly difficult with Peterson, those people would probably appreciate a heads up that Pageau considers things like, quote, some aspects of homosexuality, quote, paganist patterns of thought, and a problem for the West. Pageau is a shining example of the ample praise that can be included in these blurbs. Renowned, significant figure, popular. Something made a bit funnier, and sad but also revealing, if these are indeed written by them. Sixth is a more specialized psych offering, The Psychology of Social Status by Dr. Rob Henderson. Henderson is a recently minted psychologist PhD. What type of psychology? That information isn't terribly forthcoming. Neither the wiki or his website indicates a specialization. His advisor at Cambridge is in experimental social psych, so presumably that's Henderson's field as well. I have zero clue why he wouldn't identify this. His backstory is much more readily shared. It's at the center of his claim to fame, the idea of luxury beliefs. These beliefs are said to be a way for the affluent to virtue signal and show off their wealth at the same time, as flexing on the poor isn't as easy in modern times. Examples of luxury beliefs are discarding religious belief, acknowledging white privilege or the role of luck and success, and general all-around wokeness. These beliefs, trickling down to the lower classes, results in their harm, thus keeping the higher class safe in their status. This came to Henderson while attending Yale thanks to the GI Bill after a, quite frankly, brutal childhood, and seeing the hypocrisy of his well-off peers. The Washington Post review of Henderson's book notes that this isn't a new idea, as it was previously promoted by Charles Murray. It's notable this book has a particularly conservative slant. Quote, Henderson dismisses all liberal activism as selfish, snobbish, and misguided, and disregards activism in general, except when it's calling for rigid social norms. Naturally, this idea and story netted him time with Peterson and Barry Weiss. His dissertation was done and dusted in 2022, and I'm having to guess that he's taken the early talking head track, as there's no indication he's gone somewhere, like to do research or teaching, anywhere, really. Just a bunch of online articles or interviews, and the ability to book a 30-minute meeting with him for $350. Henderson's course here is about the psychological whys of social status. The word evolutionary shows up a couple times, so in this context, that means you probably can expect some evolutionary psych just so stories for why we be hierarchying like we do. And of course, he's going to talk about luxury beliefs. That's his brand. He couldn't not. Come here. Izzy's turn. Aw. Izzy's turn. Making biscuits, pointy claws. Yeah. So pointy. So pointy. Diversifying topics a bit is Marion L. Tupy and Dr. Gail L. Pooley with The Economics of Human Flourishing. I'll note here that I'm only including titles or honorifics if they're on the thumbnail. Marion L. Tupy has a PhD in international relations, which seems to potentially include some economics in it, and is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute's Center for Global Liberty and Prosperity. The Cato Institute, if you're unfamiliar, is the libertarian think tank and advocacy group that has, among its various policy positions, a stance rejecting climate change. Included on Tupy's Cato page is the book, co-written by the other instructor for this course, Superabundance, the story of population growth, innovation, and human flourishing on an infinitely bountiful planet. With a title like that, I don't think we have to guess what the main argument's going to be. Gail Pooley also doesn't seem to have a wiki, but a bountiful amount of pages from the Cato and Discovery Institutes. Amazon seems to have a bio for him. That's a new one. It says he's an associate professor of business management at BYU, Hawaii. Hasn't Hawaii suffered enough? Now there's a BYU campus there. Holy shit. We are only getting to the tip of this Pooley iceberg, because it seems like there's a lot going on here than adding up. Yeah, no. Bad. As can be seen in the Amazon bio, he's been all over the place. Hawaii, Riyadh, and a couple places in Idaho. It says he's at BYU Hawaii, but he isn't currently on their faculty page. But he was there at some point because there's a book signing meet and greet for him at BYU Hawaii from late 2022 that identifies him as an associate prof there. Checking other sources, this LinkedIn page seems to be him, as the times at BYU are lining up. But aside from a dead company leak for a real estate valuation firm probably in Hawaii, which is always a good look, it seems like he's now adjuncting at Utah Tech. Sure, some of the content creators are professors, in the colloquial sense of that term, at prestigious universities. Others are bouncing between adjuncting and contract jobs at various schools. I'm sure you have a guess for why this wasn't included in the promises of what we get. Weird that Pooley's teaching history isn't included in his blurb. There's nothing to see here. As we just saw, I imagine this course will be a lecturized version of their superabundance book. While we get intro courses for some topics, that apparently isn't necessary for philosophy, as we're diving straight into postmodern philosophy with Stephen Hicks. From his wiki, he, quote, argues that postmodernism is best understood as a rhetorical strategy of the academic left developed in reaction to the failure of socialism, communism, and liberalism. Mix in a little frozen peaches, Ayn Rand, and Nietzsche, and this guy's gotta be like catnip to Peterson. Scrolling down a bit, we can find the inclusion of one critique of Hicks' Pomo book by McManus, a political science lecturer at the University of Michigan. This book, quote, misrepresents much of Western philosophy and is, nested quote, full of misreadings, suppositions, rhetorical hyperbole, and even flat-out factual errors. I'm sure this class will be a real hoot. It was an it wasn't even a secret. It was known that the one science class that the majority of art majors would take to meet their one science class requirement was astronomy. So seeing an introduction to cosmology by Dr. Brian Keating isn't terribly surprising. Besides the sky and the universe just being cool topics, I think it's easier for us to conceptually wrap our heads around how the big stuff works, instead of all the little fiddly bits that makes up so much of biochemistry and physics. Before we get into his history, I'll share that I watched a little bit of this course, and he seemed to me like a nice guy who was genuinely excited to share this information. And as such, he seemed like a kind of weird fit among most of the others here. So many here are part of or close to the intellectual dark web business, ideologically friendly with Peterson, or are generally anti-establishment. In a first pass, Keating didn't seem to fit into any of those categories, but I might have been wrong. Keating is a cosmologist, which is a subfield of astronomy concerned with the universe's beginning, and not so much with the physics stuff as would be true for astrophysics. Apparently. From his assorted awards and kudos, he does seem to be a big fancy-pants cosmologist, but once again, we're hitting weirdness. This process would be so much easier if these guys were just straightforward and normal. But no, everybody's gotta muck things up with their assorted hustles. Various sources, including the wiki, put him as a professor at UCSD, or University of California, San Diego. But he's not on the UCSD Astronomy and Astrophysics website in the research areas portion. But if you come at it from the outside, like from Google, he's still there, both in a specific lab page as well as a faculty profile. Weird. It's also weird that UCSD isn't part of his blurb. Curiouser and curiouser. He's also got a personal website, which includes things like, I'm creating the university you wish you went to. Imagine if you could attend a university staffed by the brightest minds in the world, take classes in your pajamas, and graduate debt-free, because there is no tuition. I'm just going to interject here that this is my work attire. And also, in undergrad, I did attend classes in my pajamas. I was that student, and it was great. Quote, after nearly 2 decades as a professor, I'd had enough. I decided to do something about it. This something appears to be his books and YouTube series. Looking around his videos, the cosmic chat portion of his website, and we see many familiar faces. Rogan, Lex Friedman, Peterson, Michael Shermer, Dawkins, UFO stuff, Eric Weinstein, Sabine Hassenfelder, and some Musk wanking. So yeah, it seems he's playing the same game as Peterson. It's just a bit less well known. Keeping with the, we don't need intros for every topic, do we? Vibe. We've got Evolutionary Inference by your favorite conspiracy biologists, Brett Weinstein and Heather Haying. I'm not sure how much introduction this nightmare blunt rotation needs. Weinstein became a founding part of the intellectual dark web clique in 2017 when he didn't like how his school was handling an annual event highlighting the importance of ethnic minorities. Bada bing bada boom, resignation and rebirth as a conservative talking head. Haying, Weinstein's wife, went along with. Their background is in evolutionary biology, so this course should be up their alley. But as included in their wikis, they have strayed far from the biologically grounded path. We shall see if a home court advantage in the topic of their choosing remains ideology-free or not. As the next course, we've got Introduction to Neuroscience with Dr. Balal Jalal. Jalal seems to be a bit of an outlier in this group. His website's pretty basic. It doesn't seem like it's trying to help launch him in his hustle like Keating the Cosmologist was. He's frequently worked with Ramachandran, who himself is a pretty big name in neuro. Like, for a couple decades, if you're watching something educational about the brain, odds were Ramachandran would be in it. So I may have reservations about others we've talked about, but Jalal seems to be the most straightforward of the bunch. The course description seems relatively standard, although it'll be interesting to see if it focuses on his interests at the cost of not covering everything that should be in an intro course. This last line though, quote, "culminating in empowering insights on how to lead a fulfilling and purposeful life." I wonder what that'll look like in the video, and if it was something he would have included regardless, or if it was something added in due to the nature of Peterson's shtick. Somewhat out of right field compared to the courses so far is Deconstructing Decolonization by Nigel Biggar. I don't want to touch any of this with the 10-foot pole, but I'm a completionist, so we'll touch on it with a 15-foot pole. Biggar is a retired British Anglican priest, theologian, and ethicist with a PhD in Christian theology from the University of Chicago. His projects and books seem to be about absolving England and all the horrible shit it did as a colonial power, and don't seem to have been well received, to put it mildly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this course is going to be his books in a lecture format, and quite possibly a bit of a dumpster fire. Hitting us with another drastic content shift is The Art of Storytelling by Greg Hurwitz and Dr. Andy Martin. Hurwitz is a writer and former student of Peterson's. The thing that gets brought up the most is Orphan X, which I've only heard about in this sort of context, but he also wrote the screenplay for The Book of Henry. If that title sounds familiar but isn't hitting full recognition, Folding Ideas has a video criticizing the internal logic of the movie, among other issues. The title of that video, The Art of Storytelling in The Book of Henry, has become quite ironically humorous given the title of this course. The other instructor, Martin, is also a writer and a lecturer at Cambridge, and don't really have much more to add there. The course description indicates this 7-hour course has quite a bit of ground to cover if they are indeed going to hit on myths and archetypes, writing for different media, mimesis, and, quote, techniques for writing suspenseful stories while navigating cultural sensitivities, plus what AI could mean for the field. Actually, I might have to just jump to that last video. I'm curious what they have to say about AI, given the pro-Musk vibe elsewhere. Less of a drastic shift is The History of Western Music by Samuel Andreyev. I am incredibly out of my depth when it comes to music, so yeah. Andreyev is a musician and instructor. Yep. From the course description, it sounds like Lydia Tarr would like the cut of this guy's jib. Very rooted in the Western fundamentals, like Bach. Then we've got Political Ideologies with Eric Kaufmann. He is a professor of politics at the University of Buckingham, formerly Birkbeck, University of London. The wiki says he left over political differences, but checking out the reference here takes us to a piece he wrote for The Critic about it. He left because of the, quote, hostility from radical staff and students towards him and his free speech anti-woke stance, with his definition for woke being, quote, the sacralization of historically marginalized race, gender, and sexual identity groups. Coincidentally, he's got a new book out this year, The Third Awakening, a 12-point plan for rolling back progressive extremism. The summary is everything you'd expect with a title like that. I'm sure he's exactly the kind of unbiased person we need to learn about political ideologies from. Fulfilling the seemingly random topic areas is The Greatest Leaders in History Heroes by Lord Andrew Roberts. Roberts is a historian, Thatcherite, voted to Brexit, and is generally found along Conservative Party lines. His work hasn't always been positively accepted, despite his prolificness. Some choice criticisms found in the wiki. For a 2006 book, quote, a giant political pamphlet larded with its author's prejudices. Speaking about Roberts, he is, quote, devoted to public polemical conservatism as well as to historical revisionism. And he's defended some pretty heinous acts by the British Empire. I wonder if he knows the other Rule Britannia guy, Biggar. Seems like they have some stuff in common. This course focuses on 8 Western leaders, starting with Pericles, ending with Thatcher. Because one can never have too much psychology, there's Intelligence, Rationality, Wisdom, Spirituality by Dr. John Vervaeke. He doesn't have a wiki, so instead we'll jump off his University of Toronto faculty pages. There's 2 in 2 different colors, I'm not sure why. One is more sparse than the other, and I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between them. Probably something to do with the college being part of the university. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. The one on the left lets us know he's the director of the cognitive science program and also does other cognitive-y stuff. The one on the right only really tells us that he's an associate professor on the teaching stream. Associate means that he's probably got some tenure, but he's not a full professor. Also, cheap shot here, but his CV is not current. I was going to say it's interesting he's still just an associate professor because his dissertation thesis was defended in the 90s, suggesting he's been at this a bit, but this is one of the places where academia can get kind of messy, and jobs don't always line up the way that you want. So he's got a BA in philosophy, 1984, philosophy MA, 1985, BS specialized in cognitive science, 1991, and a PhD in philosophy. They're really going for interdisciplinary with their cognitive science. It looks like this baby bird never left the nest. Other than his original BA, which was from McMaster, everything else, including his teaching experiences, have been at UofT. Pro tip: it raises yellow to red flags if an academic seems stuck somewhere, especially if they're at the same school for the bachelor's and advanced degrees. At the very least, in doing this, you're depriving yourself of the opportunity to broaden your horizons in how different concepts are talked about or viewed. From an outside perspective, it suggests the possibility that you couldn't get in anywhere else, and so just decide to move forward where you were. Especially when combined with his employment history. And yeah, not that mine's any better, I know. Over a decade as a sessional lecturer, which is roughly equivalent to an adjunct in the US. And so these are typically year-to-year, or sometimes semester-to-semester contracts, and are barely above grad TAs on the teaching hierarchy. Then a couple years as a contract lecturer before another couple as a sessional. I wonder if UofT changed the title for a couple years or something? That's weird. Then a 3-year contract, followed by a transition into more stable appointments in 2016. I can't quite tell from the UofT website for this if only the full professorship for the teaching track was approved in 2016, or if that applied to the entire track. It reads like it was just the full professorship added, but I could be wrong, especially as Vervaeke netted the assistant prof title in 2016. If you aren't familiar, the tenure track jump from assistant to associate professor means you've gotten the first step of tenure. You're no longer under the same level of scrutiny. It's a new type of scrutiny. You're harder to fire, and this jump typically comes with a pay boost as well. Going from associate to full professor also typically comes with a pay bump, and means that you can get off the tenure treadmill. You've made it. And I don't know why, but not all professors will do that last step. Looking through his CV some more, I will say that he's quite active in putting out papers and books, something that is far more difficult if you're not on a research track. Looking at the journal names, and it's pretty apparent he's definitely in a different sphere than the cognitive psych one I call home. Journal of Religion, Spirituality, and Aging. IDOS, a journal for the philosophy of culture. Phenomenology and the cognitive sciences. Hypnosis and meditation toward an integrative science of conscious planes, and so forth. There is a whole host of jargony buzzwords in this course description. Wow! This guy definitely fails the elevator pitch. But for hardcore Peterson stans, it probably enhances the likelihood of them engaging with it. How similar this ends up being to his YouTube series about the meaning crisis remains to be seen. This is another course I'm not sure I'll get to, but I kind of remember seeing his name in Abigail Schreier's Bad Therapy, so if that is the case, you will get some reference checking love there. And last, the entry whose humility could only be contained prior to launch is Peterson's Intro to Nietzsche, How to Philosophize with a Hammer. Philosophy being taught by a clinical psychologist. While I imagine that would fly at smaller schools, there would be interdepartmental fights at larger schools with an established philosophy department, quite possibly even just a broad humanities department. Professors really do not like when something in their wheelhouse gets poached by another department. Like, where I went to grad school, the undergrad psych majors had to take a horrible, abysmal statistics course that wasn't concerned with any applications of how to use the math, because that's how it was taught by the stats department. And then the experimental psych majors could take a second stats course taught by psychology professors that showed them how to use any of the stupid math they learned in the first semester. Even the psych department having that second stats course caused a bit of a war between the stats department and psych department. And It was ugly, but we got to do it because they sucked. What I'm getting at is Peterson teaching this course probably isn't something he would have gotten to do at any of the schools he was associated with, like Harvard or University of Toronto. Quite possibly for good reason, but that's a rabbit hole for a different video. I wasn't going to explain who Peterson is. I think I can assume y'all know. But then I looked at his bio and I have to share it. Quote, recognized as one of the most distinguished Western intellectuals of our era. See what I mean about the self-congratulatory phrasing though? How can I possibly pick? Globally esteemed, groundbreaking research, transformative insights, captivating lectures, fearless advocacy, unparalleled clarity. Okay, I'm stopping there. The clarity happens so infrequently as to be remarkable when it does. The course. Right, the course. It's about Nietzsche, from a Petersonian perspective. If you somehow didn't get enough of it in the advice books, well, this course is for you, I guess. And after the courses, more website content. After the course teasers, there's more to scroll. The Peterson Academy is portable. You can speed up the videos or just listen to them. Wow. Next, we're told we can track our progress, share stuff on, quote, what we hope will become the world's premier intellectually oriented social media network to build your community. The picture shows a sort of report card for how you're doing on the Academy, along with a probably AI-generated progress report. While I haven't commented or shared anything, I have done some quizzes. That progress tracking isn't working yet. But hey, this is just in beta. That'll surely be working by launch, right? But this language, build your community. I can't help feel like this is ThinkSpot 2.0. ThinkSpot is Peterson's social media platform. It launched a while ago, and while it does have some regular users, it never really blossomed into the one-stop intellectual social media platform Peterson was probably hoping it would be. But now the Peterson Academy has the chance to be that thing. The free speech, paywalled square where aspiring lobsters can build their community. Seriously though, a lot of posters on ThinkSpot seem like they're trying to find the angle they can grift notoriety on. This community angle here reminds me of that. Then we've got quizzes. You know I love me some intentionally written quizzes designed to help build long-term retention. These are optional, quote, advanced AI-based quizzes and exams tailored to challenge, engage, and teach you. Aim for the topmost target and hit it. They, missed the mark, at least for the quizzes I took so far, but we'll save the specifics there for my general review of the website so far. We are also told they'll be rolling out the Peterson Academy certification soon-ish. And we're back to selling the community aspect. The subtext here is that the social feed will only be as good as what people put into it. It's not incredibly shilly right now, as there's only one person recently promoting their content, but it's not exactly demanding questions and thoughtful statements. More like appreciation for the platform and stuff you'd expect to see on Facebook. Meh. Then it's on to selling a different aspect of the community, DMs. Can't wait for that feature to get rolled out. I haven't heard any word about spam control. Maybe they're assuming the entry fee will be too high. And if you are keen to dive in after all those pitches, there is the sign up button. This has been updated for the full launch access date of September 9th and the price up to $499 a year. And if you still haven't been convinced or are leery because of the price, time for the hardware sell. Ostensibly in the description of the beta version. These will be the best lectures because professors are teaching what they love. We'll go into this in more detail for accreditation, but it's great that people are getting to teach their passions, but a well-rounded degree also has to contain the kind of more boring but important fundamentals. Quote, a world-class education, therefore, no longer has to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can learn what the elite have always taught their children at much higher quality at a fraction of the cost. I've made no secret I come from a working-class family. And through a combination of hard work and a healthy dose of luck, my husband and I both have PhDs, and through that, we've gotten to meet all sorts of people. Physicists. We've gotten to meet all sorts of physicists, some of whom even have Nobel Prizes. And you know Peterson loves that flex. One particularly interesting and kind of revealing thing I heard was from a Brit. While he loved his job and the experiences his kids were getting to have away from the UK, There was one aspect of a proper British education they would never get over here. The critical networking that comes from just going to the right schools. He did say there were pockets of that over here, but it's much more exclusive and hard to get access to. His kids would never have the level of connection he did purely by virtue of a well-placed education. While somebody with a background like mine could potentially finagle their way in if they can crack into those top-tier universities, you sure as shit aren't going to get that from Peterson's online learning platform. You just aren't. Blah, blah, blah. The Peterson Academy will help you develop sophistication so you can be an attractive, creative conservative, basically. Oh, this is good. Quote, "There is no longer any reason, in consequence, to subject yourself to an onslaught of idiot ideological propaganda in the guise of intellectual advancement to obtain an increasingly worthless degree. There is no reason, likewise, to take third-rate courses from uninterested teachers only because they are required by the very institution that is leading you into long-term financial servitude. Rest assured, little lobsters, Big Daddy Peterson's platform will be totally free from ideology. None of that floating around here, as I have clearly illustrated by talking about the courses and their instructors. There is an element of truth in that, as advanced degrees are not the path to financial success millennials had been promised. But I'm not going to claim anything, especially an online learning platform that isn't accredited and is run by a guy who could lose his professional license, is going to be the silver bullet that's just going to fix things for you. The relationship between education level and earnings is complicated. Even the why behind why is college so expensive is a complicated mess, despite having some very clear reasons, like state funding failing to recover from 2008 cuts. This is a space where people are desperate for alternatives. Mix in an amenable anti-ideology ideology, and I can see why the Peterson Academy had the high pre-enrollment rates it did. Let's continue. It seems obvious to me Peterson wrote this entire thing because we're now getting to his hallmark promises found at the end of his advice chapters. You could learn from excited instructors, which will make you more effective. You could build your own social network here and go on intellectual adventures together. You could be missing the build up and release because this is where he would normally drop in a chapter title in the advice chapters. Alas, because Peterson wants DEI to DIE, it's emphasized that this is, quote, equal opportunity for anyone, anywhere, regardless of their circumstances. That is, assuming you have the solid chunk of money to throw at this in the hopes it will buy you a better life. Quote, learn from the best with the best. Join us and reshape the future of education.
Are you sure about that?
The frequently asked questions. The last little bit here is the FAQ. It's mostly standard stuff, but a couple items are interesting. In answering what courses are available, it says the current 18 are, quote, on a wide range of social science, business, humanities, and natural science topics. Wide range, huh? Put a pin in that. Each is 8 hours long. Not really. And more are coming soon that are sure to broaden the range of topics. In those to-be-released courses are a couple from Peterson. Something Jesus, Bible-related, and maps of meaning. Plus, other stuff. Are these courses accredited? It says they're working on it, quote, in a number of jurisdictions, but they're not going to demean themselves or their educational standards to, quote, meet the requirements of any ideologically compromised expert body. As an alternative, and a potentially preferable alternative, we are seeking partnership with companies interested in hiring students of the Peterson Academy. Skipping down a little, quote, one way or another, we will place our students first and foremost in the competitive employment marketplace. Testing's optional. Now's as good a time as any to talk some more about accreditation, I suppose. Recall from earlier this video when we were talking about the cautions included in the Ralston course catalog, that the MA you'd get from completing the coursework isn't really going to be the thing that helps you secure a job. Unlike, say, an accredited BS, BA, MS, MA, PhD meeting educational requirements in job postings. Accreditation is a whole, big, complicated process that has to be renewed on a pretty regular basis. And in the US, there are 19 different organizations who are authorized to accredit schools, and accrediting programs is a separate but related process. The Council for Higher Education Accreditation has a handy little PDF primer for what you need to know. From 2002! Quote, accreditation is a process of external quality review used by higher education to scrutinize colleges, universities, and educational programs for quality assurance and quality improvement. Emphasis on external review here. People not involved with the academy have to be able to say this educational endeavor is educational enough. I suspect this is going to be a high hurdle, but hey, at least he set us up with the idea that the reviewers are ideologically captured, so won't give them a fair shake. Accreditation needs documents from the school about how they're doing in relation to the standards, peer review from inside and outside the school, a site visit, which for online schools I imagine just means touring the website, a decision from the accrediting body, and finally, periodic reviews to make sure everything is above board. Countering the idea that it's, quote, just a back-scratching exercise, and anyone can get accredited, this notes the huge task of doing all the reviews and documentation to sufficiently demonstrate shit's actually getting learned by students. Potentially useful for Peterson, this includes that an unaccredited school may not be eligible or have met the minimum standards for accreditation. If that's the case, quote, it should have some other means of quality review. If this is a route Peterson and friends take, I hope they do more than consumer reviews, because people are notoriously bad at accurately assessing how much they've learned. Peterson might be bothering with accreditation at all, because a school that's accredited can qualify for federal financial student aid. Continuing on with the FAQ, the next question asks about certificates. Quote, we plan to offer 1, 2, 3, and 4-year certificates, with the latter comparable to the granting of a traditional high-quality university degree. And it goes on about the company pairing a bit. Tests are optional. I'm going to stop it there with the full academic regalia back on to emphatically question the veracity of this claim. I sincerely doubt they'll be able to roll out enough general educational requirements in the coming months to be able to substantively back up a Peterson certificate being equivalent to a, quote, traditional, high-quality 4-year degree. Where's the basic math? Where's the writing competency? Where's any sort of paper trail to back up consumers having adequately learned the course material? Granted, I haven't been at every type of university configuration there is. I've got experience at a small tech school and larger universities, international no less. So maybe like art schools or some other degree path, there would be some loophole that Pearson would be able to leverage here that I just don't know about. Short of that though, they're really going to have to round out their course content for that 4-year certificate to carry any sort of weight outside of Peterson's conservative circles. On top of all of that, the lecture hours don't square. In colleges that employ the fall, winter/spring, depending what they call it, and summer semesters, a 3-credit-hour course means that a student will spend 3 hours each week in lecture for however long the semester is. For simple math, let's say 15 weeks. So for one 3-credit-hour class, you would have 45 lecture hours that semester, and that 45 hours does not include all of the work you're expected to do outside of class, like homework, reading, whatever else there might be. 45 hours for one 3-credit-hour class. At my undergrad, we needed 120 credit hours to graduate, which works out to 1,800 hours spent in lecture, and that's just in lecture. The Peterson Academy currently has less than 10% of that, assuming each class is 8 lecture hours. The math ain't mathing, Peterson, and I can know that because I had to take math. Tell me it wouldn't be hilarious if Twitter sees an influx of Peterson Academy grads and it collapses under the weight of programmers who learned how to code without coding. I am curious if all of the course content creators were aware of Peterson's intent here. Some seem to have been trying to spin up their own anti-school school, so it's entirely possible they were. One last thing before we get to the beta experience. I do have a little experience picking up random certificates. I did some programming courses through Coursera, and even picked up a Google IT certificate. And this was while I was doing my stay-at-home wife experience, so I was able to pick that one up for free because my income was $0. One of the things this course promised was help in networking me into an IT job. And I figured, hey, we're moving to the Bay Area. Surely there will be some demand for that there. Nope. The only things I've been pinged for are moving somewhere in the Bible Belt and doing IT for Walmart. No, pass. No. And honestly, I can't say I blame anyone. I didn't learn how to do IT. I just learned enough about IT to be potentially dangerous if turned loose without supervision. And that's the same kind of vibe I get from the courses here. The beta experience. Where to start with my Peterson Academy experience? Well, the start of it was particularly rough because my access to the site was delayed by 18 hours. I can understand that they ended up staggering people's access into the site because they didn't want to crash. I cannot understand why this was communicated so poorly. This should have been an email and a message on the website, not just something on the Peterson Academy Twitter account. I grabbed some footage once I finally did have access. There's a navigation menu along the side, getting you to the main page, the social tab, and courses you've enrolled in, and bookmarks you've made. On the homepage, there's a couple trays that will probably be more interesting and useful once there is more than the launch courses. The social tab seems to be a general posting space. This footage was from the first day, so had a lot of excited to be here sorts of things, plus some engagement bait. The courses tab takes you to the My Courses part of your profile, presumably so you have easy access to what you're working on or have completed. Clicking on a class takes you to the main course page. This has buttons up top to watch the trailer, enroll, or share it. I haven't tried sharing it and can't say I'm inclined to try. The individual videos are listed below, but only the first 3 will ever be visible when coming back to this page, which gets really annoying. And the quiz for each video opens up after you've taken the previous quiz. As a seasoned psychologist, I got in the habit of blind taking tests as a grad TA. It's a fun little nerdy exercise to see how well my knowledge is held up, and also a way to get a read on what the instructor thinks is important for the material they've covered. When I write a quiz or a test, I allocate questions for the material I want to cover. So for the very beginning of Intro Psych, this would mean there's questions on Wundt, Pavlov, behaviorists and other specializations, a general definition of psychology, and so forth. Sometimes there won't be quite enough things for me to flesh out the test with. So, like for Intro Psych, I would split it between the multiple choice questions and writing portion, and to make my grading life easier, there'd be 25 multiple choice and then 50 points worth of writing stuff. And so if I don't quite have enough things to flesh out all of those items, I'll double up on the stuff I really want students to remember. My point here being that my question selection was very deliberate, and with the intent to help promote long-term retention of the material. As we touched on, the Peterson Academy quizzes are advertised as, quote, advanced AI-based quizzes and exams tailored to challenge, engage, and teach you. That was not my experience, at least with the Intro Psych quizzes. I didn't record myself taking the quizzes, so just know that the questions are presented serially, but you can go back and change your answers. You only find out the score at the end, which is fine. Having all the questions and correct answers at the end is a nice touch. In this first quiz, there is a duplicate question plus some questions that are hitting the same topic or idea, and I'm sure this isn't covering the full breadth of the lecture. The second quiz had a couple questions revolving around one topic, and another pair on cognitive dissonance. Also, my incorrect response on the first cognitive dissonance, I'm chalking up to being rusty on the finicky definition details, as well as instructor differences in how material is discussed. There is absolutely room for individual differences here. I'm personally of the pedagogical opinion that questions should be asked in such a way that a person who knows the material, even if they didn't attend your class, should still be able to work out the correct answer. There was one professor where I went to grad school who was notorious for being bad about this. Like, in a grad level class, having questions like, on slide 23 for the lecture about whatever, what color was the background? Seriously. Terrible. I'm not saying these questions are that bad, but I did get tripped up by this instructor's unique phrasing or jargon a couple times. Questions repeating outright or hitting already covered topics was a recurring issue, and the advanced AI can probably be blamed for it. However, the questions themselves seem pretty normal. A little too normal, if you know how AI tends to work. I didn't notice any sort of weirdness that's been the hallmark of generative AI. No quiz question equivalents to extra fingers or a certain glazed expression. So I'm curious if AI didn't have a hand in the questions themselves, and these were supplied by the course instructors or potentially sourced from somewhere. So to partially answer the question of what the hell you're paying for with the textbook cost, a part of it is to make the test banks that instructors are given when they use that textbook. Particularly fancy test banks will include information about the normed difficulty of each question, so that you as an instructor can tune how difficult your test is. Critical detail about these test banks here is that these are the intellectual property of the book publisher. For instructors using them, it can be a what are you gonna do situation if they continue to use that test bank even if they're no longer using that textbook. Suing a professor for using items they technically don't still have access to is going to be a bad look, and probably more importantly to the book publisher, financially stupid. But when a professor starts generating profit off those items outside of the usual educational setting, and the publisher isn't getting a kickback for that, I imagine the book publishers would be very interested in that. Not saying that's where these questions are actually coming from. I'm just asking questions. Quizzically. The course content itself. Let's talk a little about what a class looks like. These are all filmed in a sort of white void. In-person students are theatrically arranged around the instructor in plain white chairs. No desks or writing surface other than their laps. Shots vary between a wide shot, which allows for something to be displayed in the upper third of the frame, and tighter shots on the instructor or student if someone's asking a question. What's put in the upper third varies between courses, but it seems like the intent is to highlight important parts. Or at least they tried to. A frequent comment I saw in Intro to Neuro was requesting that there be actual diagrams of the neuroanatomy presented because that's what you need to be seeing when you're learning this stuff, not whatever random art vibes the best with the text. On that note, let me explain the upper third variability. Intro to Neuros didn't seem to add much, and were pretty non-specific to the material. Jalal was lecturing with a podium. Same for Intro Psych. Generic art with text. Campbell was lecturing with a laptop on a podium. Keating, the Cosmologist, had slides visible for the in-class students, as well as a whiteboard. Does any of that make it up top? Nope. Generic art. But then you get to Evolutionary Inference, and the material on the slides seem to have at least been attempted to be translated to the upper third. This last one is beside the point a little, but I would be remiss if I didn't show you. Peterson's got upper thirds up the wazoo, and PowerPoint slides full of text displayed just as they are, not even in presentation mode. To use a beloved phrase of his, clown show. While I am relieved that these classes aren't the hyper-edited distractions that the teaser vids are, these still aren't great from an educational perspective. Sure, for something like Nietzsche, loads of text with some pictures here and there is probably fine. That is a horrible approach for topics where you need to have good figures, plots, maps, whatever, in order to make sense of the content. In typical university settings, before the rise of computer lecture slides displayed by a projector, instructors could rely on something that just is not an option here. Ugh. The textbook. Text will have all sorts of useful stuff, like figures of the brain, or in this case, cross-section of the retina, or equations for galactic movement. While they may include decorations like art or pictures, they aren't flashing up with an accompanying audio cue while you're trying to learn and it grabbing your attention.
The motor system is in the prefrontal cortex.
But people have phobias for things that are very specific.
To what degree can you derive the notion of a moral order purely from the analysis of the objective facts?
In the teaching biz, we have a term for the extra bells and whistles that can be used to try to keep the student engaged but actually come with a learning cost. Seductive details. I am slightly worried that's what the things popping up in the top third are going to be. Shiny, distracting things that end up working against the learning process. Concluding thoughts. But really, that describes so much of how these videos are set up. All the pageantry of a college classroom, but lacking in the important aspects that make learning possible. For the in-class students, having to take meager notes on your lap is not conducive to deep learning. Realistically, they're basically just set dressing. Some people can get by somehow without in-class notes. I am not one of those people. I was the person other people asked to borrow notes from because I wrote down everything. That is part of how I learn. Something I figured out by going to class. I stand little chance of finding this comment again, but in one of the class discussions somewhere, somebody pointed out that it would be helpful to have the related readings prior to watching the video, and I absolutely agree. In a typical college setting, lectures are there to reinforce the material students have already, or realistically, are supposed to have already read. The material gets elaborated on in the class, which helps boost retention. Also, they can ask clarification questions if something's not clear. All of that is missing from the Peterson Academy. Even the class chat box, which is kind of like something you'd see on a YouTube Premiere or Twitch stream, crossed with a comment section. Another student might be able to answer a question somebody asks, but the instructor, sure as shit, has already cashed the check and bounced. And they don't seem to have a mechanism for somebody to sort of supervise the class other than Michaela, Peterson's daughter, and her husband. Also, unless they call the comments periodically, it's just going to be full of old comments and kind of a mess. Testing being optional is another problem here. Testing isn't just about having proof that students learned material to a certain threshold. It's also about solidifying those memories for long-term storage. And also finding out what you do know and don't know so you can take steps to rectify the don't know stuff into known. No testing? None of this happens. Which brings me to the next issue. This seems like the perfect environment to create people who are very confident in their knowledge, but in reality, underskilled in that domain. Like I mentioned with my Google IT certificate, which did have tests, and I passed. I know about IT, but I certainly don't know IT, especially in any useful professional manner. Hearing about neurology or cosmology or even psychology is very different than having gained that knowledge through an intentional learning process. This is just passively absorbing information and hoping something sticks through osmosis. This is not how we learn, Peterson. On top of that, the depth these videos go into seems more appropriate for a seminar than a course. Yeah, seminars do have a place in higher and continuing ed, but in education needs to be more than just seminars. Like, if watching people talk about the topic was all that you needed for a degree or useful certificate in something, I'd have a theoretical physics degree. Not because I'm working in the theoretical side of physics instead of experimental. No, because my knowledge of physics is theoretical. I'd be shocked if this was able to be accredited with the model they seem to be working with, especially if they don't work to round out the subject matter. As I alluded to earlier, where's the math, the writing competency, the other important, fundamental, but potentially kind of boring courses? Even on the fronts they do have representation in, they're going to need more. Plato and Nietzsche are a part of philosophy, but there probably needs to be some intro to fill to get people oriented in how philosophy works, plus the history and movements of it, not just postmodernism. Biology shouldn't be starting at evolutionary inference. That's a higher level topic that really should have basic biology as a prereq. Their psychology offerings are incredibly biased towards social psych. I'll go through this in more detail in a separate video, but even the intro psych course omitted huge chunks of core info. That's bad. And a potential future I could see happening for the Peterson Academy, based on some of the launch courses, is it being a platform for people to give a long sell of their books. Basically, infomercials. This wasn't true for the intro courses, more for the courses on specific topics. To be blunt, the courses I identified as being the lecture version of the instructor's book. Now, some college classes can kind of be like that, especially if the professor's really trying to push their book. But in my experience, it seems that books like that come out after having worked through the material in class at least a couple times. It's not a book the author wrote and is now trying to spin up into a lecture series. My last thought here is on the Peterson Academy promise that this will revolutionize education, that they're making it accessible to anyone around the world. But, and I'm sure he has to know this, Harvard beat him to the punch here, and a lot of their courses are free, no paywall. Actually, now that I've looked, there's a not insubstantial number of prestigious schools who already have free content. Now, these aren't likely to be Lobster Daddy approved, given the ideological capture or whatever, so if that matters to you, I guess Peterson Academy is the right place for you. That is the Peterson Academy, in a very, very large nutshell. We'll have to dive into a course or two in the future and see if they're actually adequate, or if they're as superficial as they seem. They're making lots of big promises. We'll have to see how well those materialize in the coming months. Or years. Before I had access to the website, in those 18 hours I was waiting, I looked up some fan videos to see what people were saying about this. Some were pure enthusiasm and excitement about how much this was going to change their life, and others, who had been burned before by other scam schools, were a bit more realistic for what they could get out of this. As I mentioned, came from a working class family, so I definitely have memories of my dad investing in things that he was sure was going to be the thing that will get us some financial security, and they never did. $500 is a lot to take from people, especially if money is tight and they're living paycheck to paycheck. So for their sake, I hope Peterson's able to deliver on everything he's promised them. I will see you next time for some more Beyond Order, where we will work really, really hard at getting through that rule and seeing what happens. Bye. Just kidding. I'm going to say some super specific criticisms over the credits. 1, the instructor pool is, to be blunt, a sausage fest. Maybe they'll try to get more than one woman involved here, or maybe this is a reflection of who would agree to do this. Don't know. 2, there's some pesky bugs. At the end of the video, it shows the description for the next video. I don't think it's actually shown the right text or video title for me yet, out of 20-something videos. There is theoretically the ability to have course autoplay. It has not worked for me yet. Or the submit feedback button to let them know it wasn't working. Neat. The quizzes keep breaking on people. Yeah, it's still the beta version, but these seem like kind of important features to have had working by this point. 3 is an aesthetic thing. Some course thumbnails have just art in the title. Some have the instructor's face. I wonder if it's reflecting a shift between early adapters and those who came on later, or maybe it's at the discretion of the instructor. Either way, that sort of split between 2 distinct styles bugs me. Okay, done complaining. Until next time.